Hello everyone, I'm Carla Mariana, a high school student from Tech Milenio, and in this video I'm going to give you a full detailed description about the Cold War, since the meaning of the term, the most important characters and dates, economic systems, and a series of events that happened in this period. Well, first we can start defining the term Cold War. What is the meaning of Cold War and why was given to that time? The term was first acquired in 1945, thanks to a British journalist named George Orwell, who in his article titled "You and the Atomic Bomb" tried to make consciousness about the danger of the clash between the Soviet Union and the United States. But it wasn't until the American economist Bernard Baruch popularized the term. But why the name of Cold War? Because it was a conflicted period that was never declared as a war. This doesn't mean that there haven't been wars, of course. The Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, Hungary, and the Berlin Wall were some of the most famous. So, in a brief description of the Cold War, it is defined as the largest conflicted period, since it lasted 70 years, that emerged after the ending of the Second World War, and that was characterized by the clash between the Western capitalist bloc, with the United States of course, and the Eastern Communist bloc, with the Soviet Union. Now we are going to talk about the important events or dates. I'm going to present them as a timeline, one event per slide. It's easy to understand in that way. Well, firstly, we have the Yalta Conference in 1945, which lasts from February 4 to 11. In this conference, the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, the Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin, and the US President Franklin Roosevelt get into an agreement to give a final to the Second World War in Europe and taking measures to what to do with Japan, since was the last country fighting. In this reunion, the leaders also agreed to divide Germany in different parts for each victorious ally. In the same year, the atomic bomb was released in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 4 years later, the thing would be still burning. The creation of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in April 4th established a military alliance between Western countries with the whole purpose of stopping the accelerated growing of the Soviet Union and their allies. In May 14, 1955, the response of the communist blocs arrives with the formation of the Warsaw Pact. According to history, this treaty called on the member states to come to the defense of any member attacked by an outside force, and it set up an unified military command under Marshal Ivan Konev of the Soviet Union. Time later, in 1961, will be created what became the symbol of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall. The communist government of the German Democratic Republic, the Eastern Germany or the Soviet Union's Germany, started to build a wall that would keep from entering Western fascists to Eastern Germany, but what they really achieved was not keeping away the so-called fascists, but separating whole families. Finally, the period of the so-called wars started with the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962. Cuba was in a period of instability due to the revolution. The liberals had a very hateful feel against the United States, so when the Soviet Union offered them their support, they accepted. Fortunately, what was going to become a nuclear war ended up with an agreement. The end of the Cold War was officially with the abolition of the Soviet Union and the reborn of Russia. Factors that contribute to this were all exposed in 1989. A decisive year for the communism. Hungary and Poland declared a non-communist government. Germany became reunified and the Berlin Wall was demolished. Here we have the beginning of the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Now we're going to talk about the economic systems and the socialism. It is said that this type of system has many origins before the Marxist doctrine, but the most known is this. After the French Revolution, many works were published, stating the concern they had about the bourgeois power and the monarchy. This period helped to open the door to different ideas, and one of these were the Communist Manifesto. The socialism consists in a simple idea: equality. The socialism was designed in a way the government controlled all means of production and distribution of goods. The socialists thought the control was necessary to eliminate the competition among people of all classes. Also, one characteristic is the absence of private property. All of this with the objective of avoiding class distinction. Few disadvantage of this type of economic system is that it tends to become a dictatorship. No freedom of expression. In the other hand, we have the capitalism. In the capitalism is the total opposite of the socialism. This system was created due to feudalism. When the people of England started to understand that the feudalism was another way of work exploitation, they began to create a system in which the private property was the principal characteristic. With the Industrial Revolution, the generalization of manufacturing, the French Revolution, and the 13 colonies' independence, the liberal ideas spread through all the world. Although the origin of the capitalism comes from the 17th century, Adam Smith is considered the father of the capitalism thanks to his work, The Wealth of Nations. The capitalism consists in the idea of individualism. Each person carries out the production process in an independent and private way. As I mentioned earlier, it is the opposite of the socialism because it has a very notorious class division in which the ones with the material had the best life. And finally, my opinion. Well, I think that the principal problem in the Cold War was the economic system, of course, and the own stereotypes that had the ones of each economic system. It's very difficult to know what type of economic system would fit better to every nation. Each economic system emerged as a consequence of the past of some countries, and each one of them searched for not repeating the same mistakes that the previous economic systems did. For example, we have the capitalism emerged as measure against the feudalism. That's why in this type of economic system, the private property is the principal characteristic. And the same applies for the socialism, taking in account that the French were very concerned about the class struggle and the big differences between them. Nowadays exist multiple variations of the economic systems, and each one adapts to the country depending their variations or factors. And on the other hand, another important factor of the Cold War was the fear of unleashing an imminent nuclear war. The Soviet Union and the United States were big titans along Great Britain and probably France, but I wonder, what happened to the other countries? Mexico is a good example. What would have happened if the Cuban Missile Crisis broke out on those times? I think that Mexico would have been the most affected. Finally, even if it was a Cold War because any of the nations involved dared to make a movement, there were many consequences. This time, not only the loss of great amounts of lives or the separation of them, it was also the suffering during 70 years.
Okay, my name is Joel Israel Campos Sanchez. I'm a high school student at Campus Cuautitlán Izcalli. And okay, so let's begin with the first question. What countries were the world leaders during this period, during the period of Cold War? Okay, so during this period, until what I know, the two world leaders were the Soviet Union and the United States of America, and both of them were like in kind of a conflict between them. That okay. On the second question is why did countries were allies during the wars become enemies afterwards? Until what I know, the countries that became enemies were the United States of America and the Soviet Union or Russia in that case. They became enemies because of their political, economical ideas, which were very different. The capitalists from the USA and the socialists from the Soviet Union, and they were like non-compatible ideas because capitalist ideas were about liberty, democracy, and consumerism ideals, and by the other hand, the socialist ideals were more about economic, like having an economic control and everyone and all his population had like the same level, the same educational, the same economical level, and none of them had better disposition or better situations, economical situations. All of them were the same by the Soviet Union. Okay, the third question is where did the Cold War take place? The Cold War took place I believe that it was Vietnam and Korea, because Vietnam and Korea okay. In the case of Korea, it was divided between the socialist Korea and the capitalist Korea, and those were against each other. And on the other hand, we have Vietnam, where the USA had a part of Vietnam, which was capitalist, but after many tries of the USA government, it was finally defeated. The USA or the capitalist part. Some other place that could have been important was the Germany when it was divided. Okay. On the fourth question is what opinion the public have in general about the Cold War? In my own humble opinion, I believe that many people think that it was kind of a bad situation where there was political tension, economical tension in several aspects, and many countries were like afraid of what could happen if Russia or the Soviet Union and the United States get into a great conflict, like when the missile crisis at Cuba, where it was the most important part of the conflict between the USA and the Soviet Union. And many people think that it was all those were bad days of political tension that didn't carry something good to our humanity or to the world, even the world. Okay, so on number 5, what type of weapons did the two world powers have at their disposal? It was kind of obvious because they had atomic bombs or nuclear bombs, like in the case of when the USA dropped one nuclear bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay, so the Soviet Union and the USA had at their disposal atomic and nuclear bombs that could even destroy the whole world, and that would be really bad. But.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.